Chapter 19. The Gatekeeper to Eternity. My world and I are off to buy a toy. The energy of intention. In the previous chapter, you were introduced to the principles of controlling reality. Now we are going to look at specific methods. The first essential condition without which transurfing is totally impossible is that you must have good energy levels. There are two kinds of energy: physiological energy and free energy. You feel the former as warmth and physical strength and energy. To support your levels of physiological energy, it is efficient to eat well, rest, exercise, and get fresh air. Free energy originates in the cosmos, flowing along energy channels, and it manifests itself as vigor or vitality. This energy is the energy of intention, which enables a person to feel capable of decisive action. If you slog every day when you only have enough strength to carry out routine activities, and most importantly, if you are apathetic about life, then this indicates that you have extremely low energy levels. You could say that free energy is the same as life force. In youth, the energy of intention is overflowing. Imagine an old lady with a sickly guise. She dodders and groans, and you can tell that every movement is hard for her. Imagine then that she unexpectedly breaks into a run, takes a skip and a jump, and leaps into the air with a victorious shout of yes, swiping the air with a sharp movement of the hand. It seems inconceivable, and yet this is exactly what the old lady would want to do if her energy levels were increased sufficiently. Why is it that a person produces their best creations in the first or second third of their life? It all comes down to the energy of intention. Yet if you maintain your energy at the right level, you can create masterpieces at any age. Life force and creative energy atrophies when a person ceases to strive. There are people who look upon the world with indifference. They know everything already. They have experienced everything, and the feeling of satiety it gives them would seem to be to their liking. They see the world as a well-trodden path in an oft-visited park where nothing could ever surprise them anymore. You can hear them in their indifferently lazy voice lecturing others and proving that they know it all. People like this age early. Never tire of looking at the world with open eyes, and you will have more energy. Such is its quality. When a person no longer allows themselves to wonder at the world or to strive for new ideas, it is not only their development that comes to a halt, but a process of degradation sets in and they age. Life is a process. There can be forward and backward movement, but there can be no stops along the way. In nature, stops and total lack of movement just do not exist. Even a cliff transforms its appearance. In order to activate the energy of intention, you have to hitch it with a goal. Energy is ignited when you create dynamic action. It is like a feedback loop. Dynamic action generates intention. Intention ignites life force. If you remain apathetic and sit with your arms folded doing nothing, try to set about doing something, anything, and then energy will come to you. Sometimes all it takes is some kind of initial push to get you going. You might think that you are low on energy and that you need to get some from somewhere. However, this is not the case. In reality, you have mountains of energy because it comes from the cosmos, and you can take as much as you can carry. The fact of the matter is that you have probably already taken as much as you could. Energy does not disappear, so it is probably already being put to use. All its titanic power is spent on maintaining two kinds of burdens. First and foremost, the burden is the limitations and obligations that you have taken upon yourself. You agree to some kind of obligation, and it is as if it is a heavy plummet hung on you. You then place certain conditions upon yourself, and you carry out another plummet. Then you promise yourself or someone else something, and there comes the next one. How many plummets do you have around your neck? While there are relatively few in number, a person can go on. But one day there will come a time when the burden can no longer be lifted. Then there is a crisis. Pushed into a corner, the person becomes ill, falls into depression, or something tragic happens. They become tense and look at the world with fear and mistrust. As a result, reality as a reflection of their thoughts begins to genuinely take over even gloomier shades. A difficult patch in one's life begins that can go on for a very long time. The second type of burden consists of the load of excess potential. Ascribing excessive significance to various objects, you encumber yourself with an immense burden. It becomes an unmanageable mountain of baggage. These are the feeling of inferiority, I must be cool, protect and consolidate my importance, the feeling of guilt and responsibility, I must work my service and fulfill my duty, exaggerating the complexity of problems. I have a huge amount of work to do, as well as other doubts and concerns that constantly weigh you down. A lot of people live like this, weighed down on all sides by all sorts of obligations, unfinished business, harsh conditions, plans, and numerous goals. The goal will activate the energy of intention, but only on the condition that it is realized and does not just hang at the project stage. There is nothing easier than planning a job, placing conditions on it, and making promises. Take into account, though, that by pinning even the smallest obligation to yourself, you hang a weight around your neck which draws on part of the energy of intention, and you will have to go forward carrying this weight. In addition, one of the main causes of low energy levels is the basic accumulation of toxins in the body. It is very simple. The energy channels narrow like an old pipe, with a buildup of scale as a result of which the energy flow is reduced to a small trickle. This creates a deficit of free energy which causes various other problems, including a poor physical condition, low levels of creativity, illness, and everything associated with it. What happens is that the greater portion of energy that squeezes through the narrow energy channels goes towards maintaining an entire garland of useless weights. The pitiful portion of energy that remains is your total reserve for vitality, which gives you alertness, proactiveness, cheerfulness, optimism, the desire to have everything you want right now, and the feeling that you can move mountains. Judging from their condition, everyone can roughly make out what reserve of vitality they have left. You will not find many individuals who are wealthy in this regard. So all your free energy is employed in a whole range of unrealized potential intentions, plans, which only weigh you down. In order to free up resources, you have to either get rid of a portion of the potential intentions or bring them into being. Ask yourself, what is oppressing you? If you give it some thought, you should be able to drop many weights without regret. You may feel that you really need many of these weighty trinkets and could not possibly get rid of them. Yet what is the point if you are continually carrying them around with you, but you can never ever realize them? For example, I have to be better than everyone else. I must always be at my best. I will prove to others and myself what I am worth. I do not have any other choice than to continue walking the path I have chosen. Only winning is an option. Otherwise, I will not be able to respect myself anymore. I cannot make a mistake, and so on and so forth. Like giving up smoking, learning a foreign language, and generally beginning a new life as of this Monday. It is true that everything that is endlessly put off until later is a useless load to carry. These things should either be eliminated from your list or brought into being, because they take up energy which it is stupid to waste. For example, when a person is in the process of giving up a bad habit of some kind, a double portion of energy is spent. On the one hand, you still have to pay the pendulum interest on the loan, and on the other hand, you still have to carry the heavy burden of the obligation to drop the habit. This kind of rigmarole can end up being drawn out for years. Forcing yourself to do something should be replaced with conviction. If you are going to give something up, then do so with conviction and not because you feel that for some reason you have to. If you force yourself into a corner by volition, you pump up the tension even more, and this inevitably leads to a crisis. Therefore, it is more sensible to choose one means of the other. Either decidedly realize your intention or relieve yourself of the burden of the weight of obligation and channel the habit into a more manageable flow. For example, rather than scrounging cigarettes or collecting cigarette butts, it would be better to get yourself a decent pipe and purchase good quality tobacco. Rather than doing a pub crawl or drinking in secret, hiding around a corner, it would be better to carry a presentable hip flask. Basically, this means building a partnership relationship with your creditor. As a result, the harmful vice will become more measured and manageable. The bank is more likely to give a respectable client preferential terms, to say nothing of the fact that the habit once set free is much less harmful than a habit you hate but cannot do anything about. Declaring your intention at this point will only make matters worse, and of course, this is not an ideal solution. Before you turn a harmful habit into a civilized manner, you need to have a good look at yourself and be honest with yourself about what you are doing. Another type of burdensome weight would be studying, or rather, cramming. When your intention is to fill your head with information, you end up creating huge tension. In this case, intention is not realized. It is simply pumped up with tension. And so, even if I am repeating a truism, it is not worth repeating. There's no point in memorizing information. It just ends up becoming more lifeless baggage that takes a disproportionate amount of energy to load. Knowledge, unlike data, is only properly assimilated in action, through concrete examples of when an intention is realized. For example, if you are used to helping children with their lessons, try the opposite approach. Let them explain the lesson to you, and you will feel the difference straight away. It all comes down to the focus of intention. Intention has to be redirected so that passive intent is transformed into active intent. When this happens, useless weights that require memorizing will fall away instantly. You might have one huge weight that you have secretly been thinking of dropping off for a long time, but have not yet been able to finally do it. Imagine how light and relieved you will feel if you drop it. Let yourself go. Give yourself more freedom. Compile a list of things that oppress you and take the weight from your shoulders. You will immediately free up reserves of the energy of intention, which will enable you to go forward. As we said before, a goal activates the energy of intention in the process of its realization. It is best, of course, to find your own innermost goal. If you find it, the problem of having a deficit of energy will no doubt no longer be an issue for the heart, and mind will perk up and rush with enthusiasm towards their cherished dream. However, if at the present time you do not feel able to take action and conquer new heights, there is no point in trying to determine your goal. In this case, it is very probable that the pendulums will exploit your weakness and force their goals upon you. In order to find your own goal, you have to have a certain level of freedom above all from obligations to others and yourself. And to be successful, you have to be able to free yourself from one final weight. You have to allow yourself not to have a personal goal for the time being. The search requires a certain amount of free energy, and so achieving it should be your first priority. There are 3 methods you can use to increase your energy levels. 1. Free up resources. 2. Exercise your energy channels. And 3. Widen your meridians. When you free up resources, you get a tangible influx of strength. Whereas previously you gave away energy to pendulums related, for example, to alcohol or tobacco, this energy now will be at your disposal. Previously, you spent energy on stress and anxiety. Now this energy can be transformed into the resolve to act. Previously, you spent energy on doubt and hesitation, tortured by the question of whether what you were doing was right or not. Now you decide what right means for you. Previously, energy went on worry and obligations related to a sense of guilt. Now this energy is free. Previously, you were tormented by the need to confirm your significance. Now you allow yourself to live according to your own beliefs, and you feel more at ease. Your previous outgoings have been transformed into income, into the energy of intention, which will help you to create your own reality. Earlier in Transurfing, we talked about the fact that the energy of intention can be improved with exercise. Just as physical exercise develops the muscles, achieving new goals increases your energy levels. However, when the main peaks are taken and life takes on a calm flow, the energy of intention atrophies. This fall in energy level can be compensated for by doing energy exercises. As you may recall, the principle lies in focusing the attention on the rising and descending currents while doing any physical exercise. If to this exercise you add visualizing the process, in which you play a slide in your mind's eye, in which you see the reserve of the energy of intention increasing with every day, the exercises will be even more effective. Once induced, the energy of intention will increase of its own accord. If you have exercised your energy levels intensely on one day, you can expect there to be consequences on the next. Do you think you will already have more energy? If only that were the case. On the contrary, you'll be broken. If you restart physical exercise after a long break from training, all your muscles ache the following day. It is the same when you exercise the energy of intention, except that the next day it is not pain that you feel, but tiredness and a feeling of being downcast. This is nothing to worry about. It will soon pass and things will return to normal again. The important thing is to take a methodical approach. Tell yourself every day, my intention energy increases with every passing day. After a few sessions, you will feel such a boost that you literally want to jump up and down and fly. Finally, the most direct route to increasing your energy levels is to cleanse the body and shift to a diet of natural foods that have not been treated with heat. Why? This is a separate and far from superficial theme, and we will come to it later, but for the time being, for the sake of brevity, I will introduce the following analogy. Energy flows through the body like water flows through a pipe. When the body is cleansed, it is like when a pipe is clean and the water pressure is strong. It is quite natural and straightforward to cleanse the body and maintain it in that condition. You can also take another approach. You can clean the pipe with the aid of a high-pressured water source. This approach requires the practice of meditation. This approach is long and complex, and so I suggest the simplest and most direct approach, which involves physiological cleansing. High energy levels bring a person to a state that is called inspiration. When you are inspired, you are capable of generating ideas, coming up with innovative solutions, and creating masterpieces. A muse, like a moth, is always drawn towards the light. Skepticism and apathy are evidence of low energy levels. When you experience a deficit of energy, you always look pessimistically at the world, and this will instantly be streamed into physical reality. When you have high levels of vitality, you transmit into the mirror of the world the image of a successful person, and then success comes towards you without you having to chase it. There is one more thing to add about inspiration. You may have noticed that inspiration sometimes behaves strangely. Sometimes there are peak moments when the impossible seems possible, but for some reason the enthusiasm quickly fades and is replaced with pragmatism. The fire of optimism burns out quickly, and the former gloom of the gray world reigns, in which ideas about to take flight begin once again to appear hopeless. What is the point of inspiration if all it does is build castles in the sky? The answer is that what we have just described is not so much inspiration as euphoria. This condition is experienced when there is a sharp shift from low energy levels to high energy levels. Such a shift happens when strong stimulants are used, or simply when some unusual piece of information excites the imagination. An anomalous burst of energy opens the conscious mind to sectors of the alternative space that lie at a great distance from those that are currently realized materially. Theoretically, these alternatives can also become realized, except that they are situated further from the stream of the alternatives flow, and so their physical materialization requires greater energy expenditure. It is for the same reason that ideas that seem brilliant in a dream fade upon waking. In dreaming, the soul mostly flies into areas of the field that have very little in common with physical reality. Genuinely real ideas are only born of the stable energy of intention. Equally, they lie relatively close to the alternatives flow. In order for the conscious mind to go beyond the limits of the material world and touch on these ideas, one either has to be endowed with a special gift or have consistently high energy levels. Hence, one can easily compensate for a lack of talent in this area. The benefit of the energy of intention is not limited to providing a person with high levels of vitality, which enable them to act effectively in the material world. What is much more interesting than this is that the higher your energy levels are, the faster your desires are manifest in physical reality. When the energy of the cosmos passes through the human body, it is programmed by their thoughts and acquires ordered form. It is in exactly this way a radio transmitter transforms electricity into a signal carrying specific information. Once it has received an informational structure, a person's energy can illuminate the corresponding sector in the alternatives space. As a result, the metaphysical potential reality is made manifest on the physical side of the dual mirror, and the thought is realized materially. Obviously, the greater the power of the emission, the more effective the process of materialization. As you know from previous chapters, the realization of a thought does not take place instantaneously. Otherwise, our life would be like a computer game in a world of total chaos. In order to form a reflection, it is essential that there be a sharp image born in the unity of heart and mind, or a relatively lengthy period of deliberately concentrating one's attention. Perhaps one day someone will invent a materializer for the alternative space, if of course God allows it. After all, artificial intelligence is still unattainable to us, and so it should be, for who knows how it would all end if it were not. The most important thing here is that we are capable of transforming our dreams into reality. Having high energy levels does not necessarily mean using force. In order to effectively create the layer of your world, you have to feel a sense of oneness with it and even identify yourself with it. You have to take a fresh look at your surrounding reality. I am master of my reality, just as I am master of my body. You have to enter into the same time patterns as reality and not expect instant change. You need to be calm, patient, and focused on your goals. It is easy for you to control your body, for that is something that you see as a matter of course. However, some people lose this capacity as a result of certain illnesses. The body may make controlled movements or enter into a paralyzed state, becoming deaf to intention. When we are embarrassed, it is also difficult for us to have total control over our bodies. For example, the hands of a person who is inhibited and shy often make uncontrolled movements. In this state, there is no unity of heart and mind. The relationship between a person and the layer of their world is much more difficult. People feel isolated from their surrounding reality. They feel as if the layer is somewhere outside of them, as if it too makes uncontrolled movements and the person can do nothing about it. Once a person begins to feel a sense of oneness with their world, they acquire the ability to control it, just as they control their body. This ability has totally atrophied, but it can be restored. To do so, you have to constantly pay attention to the circumstances that surround you. Feel yourself to be part of this world, to be in context with it, and look for what connects you to it. In other words, to be a separate particle of the world at the same time as dissolved within it. I will not try and hide it. This is not an easy task. It is not something that can be taught. A person can only acquire a sense of oneness with the world by means of their everyday experience of life. And this path may turn out to be as long as life itself. So for those who do not find the idea of the painstaking practice of spiritual perfection attractive, there are simple, accessible instructions. The thing is that you do not always get what you want immediately. But whatever happens, you get that which you have focused your intention on. For example, if you need to increase your muscle mass, your attention should be focused on a slide which depicts your muscles growing. If you need to lose some weight, all your thoughts should be about how your body is becoming leaner. If your goal is to increase your levels of the energy of intention, then you must focus on your energy channels and energy body. And finally, if your intention is not directed toward anything, you will not get anything. Doing exercise without a specific purpose is a waste of time and effort. When your attention is focused not on the goal but on the effort, physiological energy is expanded, but that is all. For effort is a path to one goal, a means to an end. You will find yourself constantly on the path because the mirror simply reflects the content of the image. Children are overflowing with energy, but this energy is uncontrollable and is usually uselessly scattered into the atmosphere. In the same way, if a person develops their vitality to a high level, but fails to give it a specific direction, the energy will be equally as useless. A simple lamp can only light up the area immediately surrounding it, whereas a narrowly focused laser beam will shine on a point many kilometers away. Therefore, if you want your energy to work for you, it is essential that you focus on the specific direction of the goal. Purposefulness directs the energy of intention in a strictly determined direction. Concentration is essential, and concentration means focus, not tension. The thought mixer works automatically. Ideas are born and fade uncontrollably. Thoughts jump from one theme to another. The mind will restlessly swing its legs like a little child. In order to control reality, you have to strive to keep your thoughts under control. It might feel a little awkward at first, but with time, it becomes a habit. In order to develop this as a habit, it is sufficient to follow one simple rule. Teach yourself to think about the thing you are doing in the moment. Do not do anything just for the hell of it, swimming in an amorphous juice of uncontrollable thoughts. Proclaim a declaration of intention. This does not mean that you always have to be on your toes. You can let your mind drift as much as you want, but Make it intentional. By principle, if my mind wanders, it is only because I allow it to do so. In this way, you can deliberately return to a state of concentration when it is required. Essentially, the point is to make the image in your thoughts mostly contain the picture you would like to see reflected in the dual mirror. It is not necessary to remain in an ideal state of organic unity of heart and mind all the time to achieve your goal. It is enough to systematically focus your attention on the target slide. By controlling your train of thought, you subject reality to your will. It does not matter that your thoughts keep going out of control. The important thing is to acquire the habit of returning them to the stream of the target slide. When you have the habit of returning your thoughts again and again to the goal, the slide becomes a constant companion, and its image will always be in the background in the context of all that happens to you. Have no doubt, the image will be formed and the mirror of the world will inevitably reflect it into reality. Every individual has their own layer of the world. You could say that the reflective surface of the dual mirror is many-layered. Every living being has a mirror plate and at their disposal from the moment they're born. The individual's thoughts and intentions construct an image which is reflected as a separate reality. The entirety of all these realities are arranged in layers, creating what we observe as physical reality. In the case of man, the layer is his habitat, i.e., everything that surrounds him. Individual reality is created in two ways, physical and metaphysical. In other words, the individual creates the layer of his world by thought and action. It is difficult to judge which of these two aspects influences reality more. It is probable that thought forms play the leading role because they create a significant portion of the material problems a person spends a great deal of their time battling with. As you will now understand, transurfing deals exclusively with the metaphysical aspect of reality. Every individual lives in a specific environment in which they are surrounded by a multitude of people and material objects. So how does one delineate a separate sphere of existence within this motley environment? It is very simple. If you out the material aspect of the environment to one side for a moment, you are left with an essential quality that interests us above all. How are things going? Well or badly? A person's surroundings may be abundant or poor, friendly or aggressive, comfortable or less so, but this is not important. What does have the meaning is the extent to which that person is happy in these conditions, whether they receive what they strive for, and whether circumstances seem to unfold fortuitously or not. This quality of the layer, its hue, has the deciding influence on everything that happens in material reality. A layer can have light and dim hues. It all depends on how a person organizes their forms of thought. The more negative their thinking, the gloomier their particular reality will be. The worse things go, the more resentment builds up, which, due to the feedback chain, causes the layer to darken even more. From this, we conclude that your individual reality must be kept clean, just like the body. All negative thoughts must be decisively and sharply driven out, so that they do not have time to ruin your world. Away with them! It is just the same as having to take the rubbish out or do the cleaning. You have to get rid of old junk, otherwise, however hard you try, things will always go badly. However, there is a certain kind of junk that is not easy to eliminate from your world. This junk is feelings of guilt, inferiority complexes, doubt, stress, fear, dissatisfaction, hostility, and negative expectations. These are like our aches and pains that we would only be too glad to be rid of, but we do not know how. So you have to treat them. A remedy is available. Imagine this scene. A person in their world set off in a magic bus to a place where dreams are transformed into reality. So, my dear, here we are then, off to go get you a toy. That is a great world. The happy journey seems most promising. Everything is going brilliantly. What else could you ask for? Yet the anxious mind is not used to it. The mind is always glancing to one side, hoping to spot a problem. It is not possible for everything to be okay. Hey, stop the bus. Over there, the righteous that judge me. We should give them a lift so that I can make amends. No, my sweet, that is nonsense. Please, we must. Otherwise I will not have any peace. The bus stops and a group of dubious-looking types climb aboard and start complaining and making demands. We are your judges, they say. Nothing can be done about them, and so the bus rides onwards. Overall, the situation is not too bad, but the person keeps fidgeting. "Look," he tells the world, "look at those lovely people. Let us take them with us. They will set a good example for us. I asked you, what would we want of extra passengers?" The world makes weak attempts to protest, but is forced to agree, and the bus is filled with haughty individuals who make it quite plain in their manner that everyone else is below them. We are your ideal. Along the way, fear, stress, doubt, and negative expectations are all hitching a ride, and of course, the person tries to rationalize the situation wisely. Perhaps these are wise travelers who will give us direction and save us from getting lost. As you wish, my dear. The world agrees and welcomes the clamoring public aboard. We are your common sense, they claim, and continue with their common sense moaning to turn the journey into hell. In addition to everything else, the road is blocked by displeasure, blame, and aversion. The person really does not want to meet with them, but the world is so accustomed to taking with it everything the mind gives attention to. "We are your nightmare," scream the unsavory types as they burst through the doors. By now, the person would only be too pleased to get rid of his annoying companions, but it's too late. The bus is overloaded and can drive no further. The manipulators, cardboard idols, hysterics, advisors, and other vermin have ruined everything. But who is to blame? Why did they have to come along in the first place? The most destructive type of all this junk is the feeling of guilt, whether the individual is conscious of the feeling or not. If you have noticed that the world punishes you and behaves as if it is mocking you or trying to undermine you, then you have all the symptoms of the disease. Drive the infection out. Give it a good kick. The feeling of guilt is an unwanted and cocky guest who sinks into your armchair, puts their feet up, and starts to dictate their conditions. You are quite capable of throwing them out if you are conscious of the fact that this is within your power. Even if you are genuinely guilty of something, you have the right only to have to ask for forgiveness once. The feeling of guilt generates punishment in the most varied form, from tiny inconveniences to huge problems. You might just cut your finger, or you might end up in some kind of accident. Outer intention will undoubtedly include some kind of punishment in the script. This is how the template worldview works. A misdeed is followed by retribution, and the heart and mind are quite unanimous. In addition, the feeling of guilt puts serious strain on polarization. As a result, balanced forces bring all kinds of misfortune onto the head of the one who has recanted. The worst of these misfortunes is the manipulator, who will stick to you like a persistent fly. Manipulators have made a fine art of inducing a feeling of guilt in their clients. If a person has a tendency to absorb guilt and take it readily upon themselves, the manipulator will do everything it can to dump even more guilt on them. Guilt complexes are seated within us as early as childhood. Adults often use forbidden methods to force their charges to obey them. If a child spends a long time in the care of a typical manipulator, a kind of microchip is firmly inserted into their vulnerable psyche in the form of an unconscious feeling of duty and obligation to make amends for some misdeed. Having been successfully programmed, the child is forced to bear a heavy cross and is a puppet in the hands of the manipulators all the time that the microchip remains in their subconscious. So how can it be removed? You cannot suppress guilt, neither can it be got rid of just like that, because it is too deeply instilled. The heart and mind have lived like this for a very long time, eternally obliged to someone. Only a concrete course of action can draw a person out of this condition. Specifically, they have to stop justifying themselves. This is a case where treating the illness eliminates the cause. You do not have to try and convince yourself that you do not owe anyone anything. Simply be mindful of your actions. This requires awareness. If previously you had the habit of apologizing for the slightest reason, now try to adopt a different habit. Only explain your actions when it is absolutely necessary. There really is no need to tell yourself that you are not beholden. It is okay for the feeling of guilt to be inside you, but do not reveal it externally. Once the manipulators realize that they will not get the same output from you anymore, they will leave you alone. Meanwhile, the heart and mind will gradually get used to the new feeling. You do not justify yourself, which means that must be right. and consequently, your guilt simply does not exist anymore. As a result, there will be fewer and fewer reasons for your atonement. So, thanks to the feedback chain, external form tidies up inner content. The feeling of guilt disappears, and with it, various associated problems. The inferiority complex is another illness from which practically everyone suffers to some degree. This baggage makes a person feel unworthy and incapable, and this is then reflected in a physical reality. Earlier on in the Transurfing materials, we talked in detail about inner importance and the various kinds of problems that arise when a person actively strives to elevate their significance as a result of feeling flawed in some way. The paradox lies in the fact that a law applies here which is very similar to the principle of uncertainty in quantum physics. Importance decreases equal to the extent that it is emphasized. The opposite is also true. A person who has no concern for their significance has it automatically. The attempt to strengthen your position and emphasize your positive qualities is an illusion and a chase after the reflection around the mirror circle. But how do you prove to yourself that you are special and have no need to prove it? There is one more feedback chain by which the cause eliminates the effect. You have to consciously redirect your intention. Rather than trying to prove yourself or show off, you have to give up all attempts to increase your own significance. When a person manages to stop, and we all know that practically everyone in some way does this, the people around you intuitively sense that your significance does not need to be confirmed. And as this is so, people are more drawn to you and begin treating you with more respect. As a result, the heart and mind are gradually penetrated with the conviction that I am in fact worth something. There comes a moment when the mirror circle grinds to a halt, turns in the opposite direction, and starts moving toward you. Self-esteem improves, and it is as if there was never an inferiority complex at all. Doubts, stress, and fear also substantially ruin the picture of a person's individual world. Do not forget that once these thoughts have been reflected in the mirror, something will enter the layer of their world that is really worth fearing. But the greatest damage caused by anxiety is suffered by the goals one has set because, as you may recall from the previous chapter, anxiety transforms desire into longing. The stronger desire flames like the fear before defeat. The more intense outer importance will be, and the fewer the chances of success. Abandon any form of waiting that feels like longing. Otherwise, you will not get anywhere. Intention is essential to the achievement of your goals, and intention is free of doubt and emerges when simple wanting transitions to doing. In order to dull the itch of impatience, you need to have a safety net, a backup plan in case of failure, as well as accept the idea of defeat on the outset. The question might arise as to how you can accept defeat beforehand if you are tormented by a desperate thirst to have what is yours. But you will see that when things do not work out, despair, or perhaps anger, will make you wave your hand at the result you had expected. Despair can also help you eliminate inner importance, i.e., painful feelings of self-importance. If something is not working out for you and hits your ambitions hard, the feeling of hopefulness will make you give it up and ditch your self-importance like a dead weight. You will immediately feel better, freer, and lighter. Things will pick up at once. Doubts in the successful completion of a project usually arise when the mind tries to work out the path and means to achieving the goal. In Transurfing Reality, we have talked a lot about why there is no point in thinking about these things. You cannot know exactly how things will work out for the best. Your task is to concentrate your attention on the goal, as if it had already been achieved, and then outer intention will open the right doors at the right time. Now that you know the rules relating to the use of the dual mirror, you have nothing to worry about. The mirror principles constitute the most effective remedy for doubt and fear. Firstly, direct your intention towards maintaining the amalgam. My world takes care of me. Secondly, you must follow the last three of the mirror principles very precisely. For example, you are planning to go to university and want to pass the selection procedure successfully. Prior to the examination, you say to yourself, if I do fail the exam, maybe that would be the best thing for me. Then you will be able to go into the exam feeling cheerful and relaxed. This is called accepting the possibility of failure and moving with the alternatives flow. You are doing what is required of you at the same time as being indifferent to the end result, or rather, being prepared to think of any outcome as successful. There is no point in pretending you do not want to achieve the goal. Self-deception does not work. You have to not think about how the goal will be reached and not get caught up in the script. Your task is to do the work of visualizing the slide and placing one foot in front of the other in the direction of your goal. The mind's control should be focused on following the mirror principles and not on the script. What is the point in worrying if success awaits you in any case? It is for you to decide how you determine your relationship to the outcome, positively or negatively. We are all accustomed to relating to our setbacks negatively, which is why we are all forced to submit to the rules of the game in which success is difficult to achieve by default. Instead, when you take an inappropriate step, name your failure as success. Then you will stand out from the crowd and your victory will be secured. The feedback chain works here just as it does in the case of feelings of guilt and self-importance. By switching your attention from the mirror to the image and ceasing the chase after the reflection, you stop the mirror circle. Then you do not have to believe in success or persuade yourself of anything. All that is needed is to refocus your intention on the observation of the mirror principles. Once their effect begins to kick in, you will notice that reality is changing substantially. Your mind is convinced that the mirror really does work. Then you finally understand that the road to success is entirely different to how you had previously imagined. As a result, the heart and mind are calmed. Fear and doubt disappear, and the mirror circle comes towards you. The rest of the junk that has to be cleared from your world includes condemnation, dissatisfaction, aversion, and negative expectations. As far as the first is concerned, you have to be clear about the fact that any form of criticism, even if it is justified, is extremely disadvantageous. Criticism is an extremely thankless task. In their attempt to restore balance between good and bad, balanced forces will do everything in their power to make sure that the accuser be the one to sit in the dock. There will never be a shortage of cause or reason. It is advisable to make any form of criticism on your part taboo. As far as all other negative responses are concerned, there is just one thing to say. By playing in the performance, "My world does not suit me and I do not like my life," you shape and maintain specifically that kind of reality. Remind yourself again and again that you are standing in front of a mirror and that the amalgam and final three mirror principles can transform the layer of your world into a cozy little corner. Aside from this, there is nothing more to be said. Finally, if you feel bad at the moment, so bad that you have no strength to follow some set of principles, what should you start with? How can you straighten things out and get your reality back on track? Sometimes life does become unbearable. It is like when an alcoholic sobers up and discovers that their life is bleak and harsh. We will take as a typical example how gloomy morning arrives after a great party the night before and you have to drag yourself to work. There are all sorts of problems after work parties. The fact that people find it difficult to get back into the rhythm of work is obvious, but strangely, a similar thing happens to technical equipment too. Statistics show that more cars, computers, and other appliances break down on a Monday than any other day in the week. So what is happening to reality? This aspect of reality is created by people when their layers lie on top of one another. During the hangover period, people have to pay back the pendulum the interest on the loan. When there is a deficit of free energy, the thought form contains a large portion of negativity. This creates a collective tension at the workplace and nothing comes together. The mirror responds accordingly and reality is warped. If at home, electrical appliances may get out of sync, but it is not so tangible. But in companies, the combined warp effect leads to more noticeable consequences. Accidents happen, machinery breaks down, and complex and particularly precise technology works irregularly. The thing is that if a person is suffering from depression or is in an altered state of awareness, the layer of their world is drawn into muddy areas of the alternative space. Reality appears to be veiled in a haze. Everything about the surrounding environment remains in place. The conditions are the same as they were previously. The weather may even be fine, and yet something oppressive hangs in the air. If you have not paid attention to the hues of reality on days like this before, observe them in the future. You will feel as if the material world is staring at you with cold hostility. The quality of its layer has changed. Everything is going badly today. This quality is the cloudy haze, and it has a very tangible impact on everything, including technical equipment. The onset of a bad patch in life comes either with physical ailments brought by a deficit of free energy or from negative emotions that are experienced when our expectations are not fulfilled. To avoid letting cloudy areas into your reality, it is essential that you increase your energy levels. When your vitality reaches the necessary level, you no longer feel irritated. You must also do everything mentioned above about keeping the layer of your world clean. But for now, if you are depressed, you have to first straighten out your reality and lead the layer of your world out of the cloudy haze into a clear area of the alternative space. How is this done? There is one recipe for this, and like all things of genius, it is very simple. What do you do when a child is crying? How do you comfort it? Words do not have any effect. You will have to walk with it, show some care and attention. When you feel down, it is the child in you crying. Take care of it. Despite the fact that many of you appear to be serious, respectable, imposing, or cool, we are essentially the child. Push yourself on the merry-go-round, meaning do a little of what you like doing most. Take some special time out to relax without thinking about problems that distress you. My world and I are going for a walk. It will be time well spent because it is essential to clean your layer out. Much depends on this. Buy your favorite treat. Eat, my love. Get better. Devote the entire day to yourself and to your pleasures. Look after yourself and put yourself carefully to bed. Go to sleep now, my dear. Your world will take care of everything. There you have it. The next day, if you are diligent and observe the mirror principles, you will feel that the reality that surrounds you has begun to acquire warmer, softer hues. Your layer is coming out of the haze. If you are observant, you will be amazed at how real it all is. The material world that previously seemed stationary will begin to literally transform before your very eyes. The oppressive atmosphere will lighten, stopped clocks will start ticking again, and people will be more drawn toward you. The way the gigantic dual mirror works is simply stunning. Reality moves unnoticeably in the alternative space like the minute hand on a watch. But that does not mean it is not moving. That is how you can decorate your reality. But that is not all. Would you like to do a full-blown renovation? Think back to what it was like in your childhood. All of the colors were bright and vivid, and life was wonderful and full of promise. You were happy because the layer of your world, like your body, was fresh and clean. The world took care of you. True, you might not have valued it immensely, but you did not have any particular complaints either. With time, complaints and negativity in the image of your thoughts increase. As a result, the hues in your layer fade and life enters into a period where people start to say, "Those were the days." This effect is described in the early materials of transurfing as the generation shift. Time flies by. The past feels as if it were only yesterday, and yet it was all such a long time ago. Age tenaciously and inevitably takes its toll. Hopes fade and the world begins to deteriorate. Surely the party is not coming to an end already. No, there is still time to bring it all back. The former colors, the newness of feeling, and the delights of hope. If you adhere to the mirror principles, you will encounter an amazing phenomenon. The former freshness of the layer of your world will be restored. When you manage to straighten out the generation shift for yourself, then you will feel fully what it really means to control your own reality. Correcting the mirror. Throughout history, man has created all kinds of models for controlled reality, from rock art to complex instruments and mechanisms. All these models share one feature in common. They are all subject to the inner intention of man. Being a product of pure reason, inner intention acts in a linear fashion according to the principle of, where I make a turn is where I will go. Man can only willfully control the parts of reality he has made an attribute of the game. For example, you can control part of a river as a way of generating energy, but as a whole, the river will remain an independent component of uncontrolled reality. You can make a donkey move with inner intention by applying force, but it is impossible to make a donkey do anything it does not want to do. Independent reality is subject only to outer intention, which is born of the unity of heart and mind. A person has two means of controlling reality. The first is to make attributes of objects in the surrounding world. These objects are then subject to inner intention. The second means is to work with outer intention and live in harmony with nature. These means represent two fundamentally opposed paths for the development of human civilization. Contemporary society is developing along the lines of the first and least effective model. It is a path that will prove disastrous for the planet and mankind. Man can never totally tame nature, and so we find ourselves in constant battle with the natural environment. One day we are polluting the environment, the next day we are trying to conserve it. In short, everything is done according to the same principle. Transform everything into an attribute in order to subject it to the will of inner intention. Untamed reality exists independently and acts like a mirror in that it reflects the human relationship to physical reality. But this is no ordinary mirror. Let us suppose that a person wants the reflection in the mirror to turn to the right. Acting within the limits of inner intention, the person tries to turn the reflection itself. Excess potential is created as a result, and balanced forces turn the reflection in the opposite direction. The world does not respond because the mirror has become distorted. The mirror of the world is distorted by the phenomena of polarization. As you may recall, polarization takes place for two reasons. The first is a dependent relationship based on comparison, juxtaposition, or stipulated conditions. For example, I am good, so you must be bad. Or, you will be good if you acknowledge my superiority. The second reason for polarization to take place can be defined as turning the screws. When a person tries to put pressure on the reflection with inner intention, nothing happens. This makes the person think that they need to apply even more pressure, and so with brute force they continue to push for what they want. Balanced forces eliminate polarization through the collision of opposites. Consequently, the result turns out to be the exact opposite of the person's inner intention. The mirror can be straightened out if polarization is eliminated. This is quite simple, just like straightening a bicycle wheel. The wheel bends in areas where the spokes are too tight. If the world would not obey and seems to act as if to spite you, it is essential to determine what has caused polarization to occur and then to relax the corresponding potential. The indigo children will help us understand these processes as they are extremely sensitive to excess potential. The indigo child is characteristically independent and intuitive with a strong sense of their own individuality and high levels of awareness. These qualities develop as a reaction to the attempts of others to force them to conform and fit into rigid social structures. Every cell within the greater structure, including the family unit, strives to control children's behavior, making it as orderly as possible. To some extent, this is necessary, but not to the extent a child is made into an attribute of a game in which the main rule is, you will do what I tell you to. Obviously, this primitive type of approach can only create polarization, and it makes children uncontrollable like leaves swept up by the winds of balanced forces. The adults who are foolish and dissatisfied usually do whatever is within their power to turn the screws of discipline. In response, the children either become even more wild or become broken in spirit, allowing themselves to be transformed into attributes or elements of the structure for whom everything in life is correct but not okay. Naturally, no parent would want their child to become a social outcast, yet the fate of the common screw is not to be envied either. Many adults will confess that in their life they did everything right, but nothing good came of it, or did many things wrong and nothing was right. Every parent wants these things to be different for their own children, and so in their efforts they ever more strongly cause polarization, unyielding in their ignorance of what they are actually creating. All inner intention of any tutor ignoramus can be reduced to one idiotic formula. I want the best for you with all my heart, with all my ill-conceived might, and so you will do what I tell you to. Any problems associated with the upbringing of a child can be resolved by abandoning short-sighted inner intention and contemplating what might have caused the mirror to be warped. Firstly, one has to determine where the opposite poles of polarization are manifest. If the spokes on one side of the wheel are too tight, then they should be released a little on the other. The striving of the indigo child to independence and refusal to accept discipline can be seen as the loose spokes. What is making the spokes on the other side too tight? the tension comes from the pressure placed on indigo children to submit to the will of the adults around them. It turns out that orderliness can give rise to huge chaos. What happens if you keep turning the screws? The spokes elsewhere will become even looser, and eventually something will break. Obviously, in order to reduce the effect of polarization, the over-tightened spokes have to be loosened. How? Orderliness needs to be mixed with a dose of reasonable disorder. There are many ways of doing this. You can jump on the bed, thwack each other with pillows, howl or make strange sounds, push and shove, crawl around on all fours, or think of other ways of getting up to mischief. You could also lie in wait for someone in the family and jump on them. At the table, it helps to smear jam on each other if there are no cakes on hand. Or in the summer, if you are playing near water and find a muddy puddle, then that is a treasure, and you know what has to be done. Generally speaking, the more this kind of sensible foolishness, the more obedient the child will be. The reason behind the paradox should be clear to you by now. Orderliness can equally as successfully be broken with British humor, in which seriousness is taken to the absurd. Cheerfulness, like boredom, is a reflection of the state of the soul. We have already mentioned that boredom of itself does not exist, but just an eternal need to control reality. This need represents an inherent quality of the soul. Why does the soul need to have fun? Probably because when you are having fun, you feel good. Why do you feel good? Because humor and cheerfulness reduce importance. It is impossible to shape reality when excess potential is present that blocks the energy of intention and warps the mirror of the world. If you make someone bend over backwards and tie them up, will not their body feel discomfort? The soul feels exactly the same kind of discomfort when it is held squeezed in a vice of excess potential, which is always there to some extent. The restless mind is always twisting the arm of the soul. When fun reduces tension, the soul is set free. That is why it is good when we are cheerful. We experience a feeling of inner comfort which is just as real as any physical sensation. In principle, the mirror can be corrected without the use of humor. If you are not inclined to fun and mischievous tricks by nature, you can simply contemplate on where you can relax the wheel a little. Any form of inevitable coercion should be diluted with freedom of choice. For example, do you want to wash the dishes or pop to the shops? Even discipline can be transformed into a free display of will if it is based on conscious necessity. When an adult dictates by the rule, "You can't," and do not answer back, backing it up with the argument, "because," then they are not an adult at all, but a fool endowed with power. Would not it be better to discuss things as equals and model the situation according to the principle of what will happen if? Coercion distorts the mirror and so generates the opposite result. To reduce the effect of polarization, you have to reconsider your stance and shift from a demonstration of power to an attempt to win respect, and replace authoritarianism with trusting relationships. Instead of using coercion, it is better that a child desire to do whatever is being required of them. The necessary approach here is to think of a way of turning what is a burdensome duty for the child into something that increases their importance. Affirmation and consolidation of personal significance is a fundamental motivating factor for all people, but children especially. The most appropriate method of interacting with children is described in the principles of frailing set out earlier in Transurfing Reality. Intuition is another quality that should be developed as a priority. In indigo children, the right hemisphere of the brain dominates. The education system, however, utilizes the left hemisphere approach, the goal of which is far from developing skills and abilities. The system forces children to learn the content of the lessons and then regularly report it back. In this approach, it is predominantly the left hemisphere of the brain that works, although the state is a passive one. The desire to fill up the mind with information generates an unambiguous response. I do not want to. Knowledge acquired in this way is useless. It is simply held by the memory in passive form like goods stored in a warehouse, and very quickly loses its worth and is forgotten. The established state of the education system could be easily corrected. All it would require is to focus the student's intention differently. First, the very roots of the teaching methodology would have to be changed from learning by heart to learning in practice. The brain would then work as it is supposed to, in its capacity as creator rather than storage warehouse. Secondly, the objective of teaching would have to be changed from reporting to teaching others. Yes, exactly. There are special schools set up in which the children literally teach each other. That is, they alternately play the role of teacher and student. Children that attend schools of this kind brilliantly assimilate complex curriculums in record time, and it is all down to the fact that intention has been set to be active. Schools such as these are very few and far between, also difficult to get into. You would think this innovative method could be implemented across the board since it has been proven to be 100% effective. But no, not for anything. The reason for this is that it is not in the interests of the structure. The structure does not need talent, great individuals, or eccentric personalities. What it needs are reliably functioning components. That is why everything is fine and the education system is perfection itself. The system produces serviceable components and does so in the manner demanded by the structure, the world of pendulums. Yet, as we know, trees also grow on rocks, and a genius will sometimes grow from the vice of common order. If you do not want your child to become an outstanding exception, pressure them in the spirit of all the canons of the system. But if you genuinely desire your children the best when you are interacting with them, constantly observe the level of polarization taking place that warps the mirror and makes the child uncontrollable. The indigo children, now the majority of the younger generation, display many wonderful qualities, the most important of which is individuality. In the world of pendulums, it is very difficult for children to preserve this quality. For this reason, it is extremely important to always bear in mind the main rule of transurfing. Be yourself and allow others to be themselves. The spokes should not be loosened too much either. All things in good measure. So where is the golden mean to be found? It is a matter of observing, figuring things out, and applying the principle of correcting the mirror rather than blindly following your typical approach. It is within your power to assist children in becoming outstanding personalities. They will be capable of working out for themselves how to fit into the structure. The reality maker. Up until now, we have talked about how to transform your life into a conscious dream and the layer of your world into a cozy corner. The mirror principles have a tangible and yet a subtle impact on reality. Now you will be introduced to more powerful approaches. The target slide is the central instrument of transurfing, visualizing a picture in which the goal has already been achieved. I will not repeat here all the ideas that were described in detail earlier in the book. I will just remind you of a few key elements. The slide should not be seen as an external moving picture. You have to be inside of the events of your imagination. What you are doing, when the goal was achieved, what you are feeling, your immediate environment, and anything else that is happening. When you place yourself at the center of the slide, you can imagine yourself with everything you strive for. This is not a technique. There are no strict rules that must be followed. Practice the slide approach in your own way. This is just one principle to keep in mind. You are standing in front of the mirror of the world, and you are shaping an image in your thoughts of what you like to have streamed into physical reality. The target slide determines the vector of the alternative's flow. If you methodically turn the slide in your thoughts, the flow of events and circumstances you encounter will be aimed towards the goal. You do not need to have a precise plan or know how it might be realized. There is no need to think about the means. The right doors will open at the right time, concrete paths and opportunities, and you will sought them. You must not place strict conditions on how the goal should be reached. Your task is to concentrate on the final result. Aside from the target slide, there is also the visualization of the process, also described in the early chapters. Once you are on the path to your goal, have fathomed how it will be realized, and are doing everything necessary in the material world, the process can be accelerated through visualization. The principle here is the following. Everything is going extremely well, and today I am doing everything better than yesterday, and tomorrow will be better than today. You could say that this is like working with the oar in harmony with the alternative's flow. As long as you hold the target slide in your thoughts, you can be sure that circumstances are working towards achieving the goal, even if it does not seem that way. You can play the slide in your mind's eye as much and as often as you like, but make sure you do it for at least half an hour each day if you genuinely intend to achieve the goal. There are several methods that can consolidate the effect of visualization. The first is energy currents. The sector of the alternative space is materialized via energy which, passing through the human body, is programmed by thought and transformed into the energy of intention. The more powerful the transmission of energy, the more powerful the effect. The force can be increased by concentrating one's attention on the energy currents. This involves imagining that from the center of the body, somewhere in the area of the stomach or solar plexus, two opposite arrows exit to the length of about 1 meter. Mentally turn the arrows simultaneously so that the front arrow points upwards and the rear arrow points downwards. Turning the key in this way activates the descending and rising currents. Imagine, without putting too much effort into it, that they are flowing along the spine in two opposite directions and reach out one into the sky and one into the ground. Focusing your attention partly on the currents of energy, launch the slide and play it to your heart's content. This exercise is best practiced when you are on a walk, in a quiet place, or when few people are around. The next technique is called the frame. Think about what you would like to be doing when your goal is achieved and what would represent an integral part of the target slide. Its indispensable attribute. You might be sitting by a fireplace in a rocking chair, standing at the helm of your personal yacht, planting roses in your garden, or shaking hands with a business partner having sealed a successful deal. Imagine any characteristic fragment of the slide. Turn the picture in your thoughts several times. It should create a kind of integral impression, an instant mold of the slide, containing a flash image and an accompanying feeling. This is the frame. For the sake of convenience, you could give it a short heading. From time to time, turn it on in your memory for an instant as you would turn on a light. Do this whenever it naturally occurs to you to do so, again, without applying too much effort. The frame represents another thread that connects you with the target sector of the alternative space. The effectiveness of the frame can be embellished with the help of the so-called explosion wave. Shape a frame or simply a picture in your thoughts that you would like to translate into reality. Immediately follow it by imagining that a sphere is expanding outwards from your body in all directions, as if your energy field had suddenly exploded. The explosion wave can extend as far as you are able to imagine it. You can repeat this exercise several times until you're tired of it. So what is happening here? You create a mental image and send it out into the universe. You can be certain that your thought will not be lost without a trace. You just have to bear in mind that the mirror works with a delay. Another technique is the outer sphere. You may never have experienced your energy membrane or felt it expanding as it becomes subject to your imagination. This will be because your actions are motivated by inner intention. Now imagine a sphere surrounds you that does not belong to you. Imagine that the sphere draws you. You can feel that something outside of you is trying to stretch out your body. Somewhere within a radius of 5 to 7 meters lies an invisible front. If you try and stretch it or squash it slightly, it will show a springy resistance. Now you will have felt the sphere more clearly. This is the borderline that connects you to the outside world. What is inside the sphere is yours, and what is outside, the external, is not yours. At the same time, you could say that the sphere belongs to you to the extent that you can feel it pulling you. Intention has become redirected. The proactive essence now lies on the outside rather than inside of you. By way of analogy, if you try and control an object with the power of inner intention, such as by moving a pencil with your willpower, it will not work. Instead, try and imagine that the pencil draws you with invisible threads. It is by means of this connecting link that you can move the pencil. Likewise, if you try and rise up into the air, you will not take off and fly. Instead, imagine the opposite happening, as if the world itself is lifting you up into the air. You might have some success if you manage to transform inner intention into outer intention. The point is to try and go beyond the point where your will tries to make the world obey it, to allowing the world to do it itself. This is all quite complex, and yet, for our purposes, it does not have to be. It is enough to feel the presence of the outer membrane. Once you sense it, do not lose that feeling. Partly focus your attention on it and then begin to play the target slide in your mind. The sphere will serve as a kind of antenna for the transmission of thought energy, and this will substantially strengthen the efficiency of the slide. Another technique is scenery reduction. Try and reduce all the thoughts that come into your mind to the common denominator of your goal. Ordinarily, even arbitrary thoughts arrange themselves in a logical order, each one connected to the last. Complete the logical chain with a fragment of your target slide. Just remind yourself from time to time what you were striving towards. Whatever you find yourself thinking about, whatever you are doing, return your attention to the goal. Make a background image of your slide. Every event, every chunk of information should be perceived within the general context set by that image. Then you will shape the layer of your world more effectively, and your intention will be manifest in reality. Your surrounding environment can also be brought into alignment with your expectations of the goal. You may be walking in the park and turning the target slide over in your mind, in which you are working in the garden in front of your house. Look at the trees and the grass through the prism of your slide. You will feel the scene transforming, acquiring new hues. You might have the feeling that in a virtual sense you are already in that garden. This effect arises as a result of the slide being projected over the scene. Your attention is partly focused on the sector of the alternatives space where your future garden exists, while your eyes perceive material reality of the present moment. What happens is a kind of transformation of current reality in the manner of the sector representing your goal. In these moments, the process which involves the materialization of your mental image acquires greater intensity. You may recall how you felt in your childhood when things were relaxed and comfortable and the world took care of you. You were not conscious of it then. Things were just okay, and that was that. Yet, with time, you became increasingly demanding and likely to express your dissatisfaction, and this caused the world to lose interest in you. What do you associate with this feeling of calm and coziness you experienced as a child? You can make this association your key to scenery reduction, around which you feel safe and secure. From time to time, recall that carefree, happy setting, and your world will again gradually become friendly and comfortable. The final technique, one especially for the lazy, is the Goal Amalgam. The most important condition for visualization to be successful is that you do not force yourself to practice it. If you find yourself putting pressure on yourself to turn the target slide in your mind because you are not getting any enjoyment out of it, you will generate excess potential. Balanced forces will reduce your work to nil as a result. It is better in this case to abandon the burdensome task and pass it off onto the shoulders of your world. Ask your world to carry you. Let your world take care of realizing your choice. Tell yourself, although the how may be unbeknownst to me, everything will work its way through. In declaring this intention, you program your world to let events spontaneously unfold in such a way that they will bring you ever closer to your goal. As a result, you let go your grip and allow outer intention to realize the goal. Now you can relax and give yourself permission to simply enjoy the target slide. You are no longer obliged to work on it. The world's doing that for you. While relaxing in the world's embrace, do not forget to remind the world from time to time what you expect to receive from it. And of course, do not float in the clouds. Carry out whatever is required of you on the physical plane for the goal to be achieved. Whatever technique you use, always remember that you are not expressing a wish. You are expressing a firm intention and see the goals as an inevitable finale. If you cannot bring yourself to say, I have, at the very least say, I plan to have. In order to genuinely intend to receive your order, you must make concrete action that will confirm the seriousness of your intention. For example, if you want to get up in the morning at a certain time, you might risk oversleeping. But if you set your alarm clock, you are likely to wake up a few minutes before it goes off. The point is to give focus to your intention. This is what you are doing every time you touch wood or throw salt over your left shoulder. Any folk custom that presupposes carrying out some kind of ritual will be based on this principle. For example, in ancient times, in order to hold on to the timid bird of happiness, people used clover to help them. In a moment of good fortune, a person would hold an object decorated with clover leaf, and in a moment of danger, the same. The triple-leafed clover was also considered a means of protection from evil forces. The point here is not that a certain object is endowed with exceptional qualities which enable it to serve as a talisman. The magical power of any given object lies in one's relationship to it. When a person is filled with a belief that a talisman or ritual is capable of producing some kind of magic effect, they will be giving focus to their intention. You can make up similar kinds of hooks on which you can comfortably hang your intention. This approach, however, is, as they say, an acquired taste. You do not necessarily have to make up magic rituals, but you do need to take concrete steps that demonstrate that you're serious. For example, if you want to have your own house, act as if you are about to move in any day. Look through the advertisements and catalogs, choose furniture and household equipment in the shops. Right now, investigate everything associated with moving in. Giving focus to your intention is a very powerful thing. The fact that there is a wide variety of techniques that can be used to strengthen the slide does not mean that one is necessarily more effective and another less so. You can choose to try out more than one technique at the same time or stick with just one. The criteria for your choice, the preferred technique for you personally, should be the one you like the most and that you think works the best. When you are applying these techniques in practice, avoid going to extremes, either being excessively diligent or sloppy. Some visualization methods recommend carrying out the visualization with enthusiasm and passion, whereas others suggest shaping a thought and then letting it go into free flight, or even forgetting about it, and thereby not getting in the way of the realization of the order. As you know, the optimal approach is always the golden mean. Instead of racking your brains over where to find it, adopt the following principle as a rule. However it works out is how it should be. You are perfectly capable of developing the right methodology for you and practicing it successfully. The most important thing is that the heart and mind agree that you are taking appropriate action. You create your own reality like a reflection in a mirror. How you will stand in front of the mirror, only you can decide. Create the layer of your world in a way that suits you. What do I mean by this? You must not feel any inner discomfort when you are practicing the visualization technique. Outer intention appears only when there is unity of heart and mind. This unity cannot be achieved if you are forcing yourself to carry out a compulsory task. This will not get you anywhere, and it will simply be a waste of time. Visualization of the target slide should be carried out in a way that most suits you, that you find comfortable and pleasant, with the only limitation being that you must not look at the slide from the outside as if it were a static image. Live inside of it, at least in a virtual sense. Imagine yourself living in the slide, not external to it. Everything else should be done in the manner that most appeals to you. The one thing you must not do is try too hard. Regularly, take pleasure from your thoughts of your goal as if it had already been achieved. Surely you will enjoy thinking about the various consequences of your success, so do something nice for yourself. Do not turn it into a chore. When you think about something that gives you pleasure, you're moving directly towards your goal, and the knowledge that you are moving closer to it also gives you pleasure. You can be quite certain that if you manage to set up this vicious circle of pleasure, the goal will inevitably be reached. Success loves regularity the most. It might seem unlikely to you that you are capable of shaping your own reality that easily with the power of your thoughts. Yet have you ever tried, even over the course of 1 month, to systematically and consciously focus your thoughts on a goal? Probably not. You are used to letting your thoughts flow freely. They become diffused into a formless mass in the atmosphere, and so they produce no visible result. Only our worst expectations, the things that worry us and therefore occupy all our thoughts, really ever come true. Imagine this absurd scene that you had planted an apple tree and were seriously hoping that the tree would give fruit this instant. Because apples do not appear as you hoped, you lose patience and leave waving your hand in despair while the apple tree wants to shout, "Wait a bit longer, for goodness sake!" The same thing happens with the goals we set. Reality cannot be shaped with a single wish. These are the main techniques for actively influencing reality. If you practice them, you will come across a very curious phenomenon. Let us say today that you are inspired and practicing visualization with intense enthusiasm. The next day, you notice that something unusual is happening to your reality. For example, throughout the day, you meet several individuals with a very unusual appearance. They are either too tall, strangely dressed, or ugly. You might notice that people are inexplicably irritable and that conflicts are arising when there is no need for them to, or that There is something strange about the day, as if you were in a dream. This phenomenon can be explained in the following way. In the ordinary state of consciousness, the layer of your world moves with the alternatives flow, that is, in the stream of least energy expenditure. Intense visualization causes the stream to be straightened so that it takes the most direct route to your goal. Narrowly focused thought energy carries your individual reality into intermediate areas of the alternative space, which lie to the side of the normal flow and where everything functions at an optimal level. These are transit zones, which we usually come across in dreams, but which are rarely realized in reality because they involve unnatural scripts and scenery and require heightened energy expenditure. The energy of your thoughts has a more forceful influence on your reality, causing it to become deformed, like the surface of water when the stillness is disturbed. You are no longer surprised by ripples in the water. Now you can expect to see something amazing. Ripples in reality. This does not mean that the anomaly you observe is pure coincidence, and that the fact that people are more irritable on these days is connected to magnetic storms, or that sometimes you do just so happen to see characters with a strange appearance. An unusual reality bursts into the layer of your world when it passes transit zones. Ripples appear specifically after an intense visualization practice. When you observe it, you will understand. It makes quite an impression. So you can influence your reality with varying degrees of force depending on which technique you use. In principle, the amalgam is sufficient to transform the layer of your world into a cozy corner. But you can achieve much more by initiating the intention of the maker in unison with the other techniques described above. For the sake of comparison, imagine a scene in which two toddlers meet up. The world pushes one in a pushchair, while the other takes its world by the hand. As children are given to doing, the first proudly announces, "My world takes care of me." The other retorts, "Well, my world and I are going for a walk." Do you see the difference? Finally, the last thing I would like to share is that I once received a letter from a reader in which she inadvertently expressed the main idea of the practice. I do not really understand the transurfing techniques, but as I started to change my relationship to life, I began to get the clear impression that everything was wonderful and would get even better, that everything was simply unfolding as it should. If you are able to maintain this integral feeling, then you might as well forget about all kinds of techniques, because this will be sufficient. Integrating intention, expressed as everything is wonderful and unfolding as it should, creates a general image of success, which is then reflected into reality. So your potential is only limited by your intention. Make your own reality. Coordinating the dream. Everyone begins their life in a certain set of circumstances. I was born into poverty and I cannot climb out of it. I have to make the best of what I can get. I have to do what is expected of me. The situation hypnotizes, grips the person so that they fall under the influence of the daydream that happens to them. All the while, that person is seeing the situation from within the dream. It is all the more firmly consolidated in the world's mirror. A person who is caught by the power of their reality simultaneously maintains it. The poor get poorer, and the rich get richer. You may recall that in the previous chapter we talked about the illusion of the dual mirror. It is focusing attention on the reflection that turns life into a subconscious daydream in which you are at the full mercy of circumstance. Reality will dominate you all the while that you're spellbound and anxious and watch what is happening in the mirror. In exactly the same way your attention is immersed when you catch a film on a screen, only in life the immersion is considerably deeper. You're hypnotized by the reflection which literally pulls you after it into the mirror circle. How can you transform your existence from a subconscious into a conscious dream that you can control? You need to understand one simple thing. In the world there is you and there is the mirror. While your attention is focused on the reflection, you are inside the mirror. Everything that happens inside the mirror happens independently of you. Your life is like a computer game in which someone else makes up the rules. Of course, you are granted attempts to influence what is happening there, but you are deprived of what is essential. You cannot leave the game. There is only one thing keeping you locked up, and that is your attention. You are capable of quitting the mirror. Inside the mirror, there is non-lucid dreaming. Outside the mirror, there is lucid dreaming. It is the same reality on both sides of the mirror, for it is a dual mirror. But there in Mirrorland, you do not control reality, it controls you. Inside the mirror, you are in the hands of illusion that the reflection can be altered by touching it. But that is only possible from this side of the mirror, where inner intention becomes outer intention. To escape from the inside of the mirror to the outside, you have to switch your attention from the reflection to the image. Once you are conscious of the fact that you are standing in front of a mirror, you acquire the ability to shape reality to a mental image. Having freed yourself from the illusion, you have to observe the fifth principle and redirect your chain of thoughts from do not want to what you do want, from what you do not like to what you like, from illness to health, from means to end goal. If you were to observe your life for a while, you would soon notice that at almost every step you end up having to accept circumstances and obey things you assume to be inevitable. You are used to perceiving the dream passively, as it is. At best, you try to resist events, insisting on your own scripts and battling with the alternatives flow. All you really have to do, though, is change your relationship, i.e., the image in front of the mirror. At this point, you will cease to be prisoner to the game. It will start unfolding outside of you and in accordance with your will. Instead of being a chip, you will become the one throwing the dice. Now, however, a new rule comes into play. If you face what you consider to be an unlucky combination, you have to accept it and declare it successful. If you do not want to remain inside the mirror, you have no choice other than to follow this rule. It is not enough just to redirect your train of thought. You have to switch the mind's control from script development to dynamic, ongoing adjustment. You are the master of your world while you observe the sixth and seventh principles. Normally, the mind objects if impending events do not fit with this idea of what should be happening next. Now it has to be the other way around. Every time the mind expresses its dissatisfaction about a deviation from the script, you have to quickly come to your senses and readily accept the change. Everything is going as it should. The mind really struggles with the idea that at the beginning of the road, when everything remains unclear, there is still no need to worry about the means. The mind will constantly catch itself thinking about how the journey will possibly happen and picks over all sorts of negative scenarios. How one would like to tell the mind, just get it, idiot. It's none of your business. Your task is to focus your attention on the end goal. People prevent their own plans from being realized. When you make a wish, the mind always makes a rough plan beforehand of how events will develop. This is the nature of the mind. When events do not fit with the scenario, we feel that things are not working out, whereas in fact everything is going as it should. Because the mind is accustomed to thinking in cliches and adopted thought patterns and does not want to make changes to its script, the person carries on according to the original plan and spoils everything. The paradox is that no one can ever know how events should develop in order to realize their order. If a person nonetheless insists that they do know, nothing will work out. Your dreams seem difficult to achieve because you are held in the grip of certain standards and simply will not let those dreams be realized. Your door is locked shut with stereotype locks. Create the desired image, the goal in your mind, and then just place one foot in front of the other in the direction of your goal. Everything that happens to you is all for the sake of reaching the goal. Adopt the intention of the maker. Everything is going as it should because that is what I have decided. I manage my world in the way I see fit. I am no longer at the mercy of circumstance, but neither do I try and control everything. By playing the target slide in my mind's eye, it is not the circumstances I am shaping, but an ultimate picture of the world I intend to live in. Attempts to influence events are the work of the mind's inner intention, which tries to push for its own scenario. The mind has no way of knowing what awaits it on the path to the goal. Circumstances are created by outer intention, and the alternatives flow. My task is to determine the vector of the flow, but what channel it takes does not concern me. Imagine that you were woken up from your mirror daydream because something is happening. The events and scenery are all as they should be, but you are seeing things differently, as if you had escaped the flow of events and come to your senses in the middle of a huge spherical mirror. A gigantic kaleidoscope spins around you, sparkling with the many facets of reality. You are part of this reality, and at the same time, you exist separately and independently of it. It is this same kind of realization of one's separateness that a person experiences when they wake up in a dream and understand the dream now depends on them and not the other way around. In the mirror daydream, everything is just the same, the only minor difference being that reality reacts more slowly. Once you get used to its slower gear, you discover something quite wonderful. Reality is quite pliable and changes adapting to the image in your thoughts. What does this mean? Where are you? You are now outside of this world. You have exited the mirror. The Maker's Verdict. Now, dear reader, you know everything you need to know to create your own reality. You cannot change the whole world, but your individual reality is at your disposal. When you escape the illusion of the dual reflection and stand external to the world's mirror, eternity lies before you with its limitless possibilities. There is not meant to be a single drop of artificial pathos in these words. The alternative space holds three truly invaluable gifts: your future, which you are capable of materializing; sacred knowledge, which can transform you into a genius; and something else that takes your breath away. What this last thing is, you will learn a little later. First, we will talk about knowledge. You might think that only certain outstanding minds have the answers to your questions, and so you search for information in various sources and try to learn from someone else. This process can go on forever. You can spend your entire life interacting with enlightened individuals who supposedly know what you should do and how. But how do they know such things? Perhaps they became so knowledgeable by reading a huge number of books, or perhaps, unlike you, they have a special talent? Neither is true. Imagine that you have flown to Earth from a distant planet. Everything is different, unfamiliar, confusing. The people in your group have split up, setting off in different directions. Each makes their own discovery. It turns out that you can gather mushrooms in the forest, you can swim and fish in the sea, and in the mountains you can ski. All sorts of creatures inhabit the Earth, some of which are harmless, and others will quite happily devour you. In the same way, humanity is constantly discovering something new. The flow of knowledge is inexhaustible. However, those who do the inventing and the creating are very few. The rest watch with surprise. What made them think of it? They must be one of the chosen ones. So what makes a person chosen? Their goals and doors are unique, inherent to their unique path. When you walk your own path, the treasures of the world are revealed to you. Then others look at you with amazement, wondering how you did it. It's that simple. The paradox lies in the fact that although this principle is superficially quite obvious, the awareness of it remains obscure. Everyone can see in order to reach new, previously unknown heights of success, you have to step out of the rat race and set out on your own path, and yet they continue to walk in the footsteps of others, trying to repeat their experience. I remember when I was little, my parents took me to the forest for the first time. My mother and father found some wild mushrooms and joyfully announced their find to the entire forest. I, on the other hand, could not find a single one and wandered between them in despair, naively thinking that if I just followed behind a grown-up, good fortune would smile upon me, for they were the ones finding the mushrooms, so they obviously knew where to look. But my efforts were in vain. It was only when I set off independently, in a different direction, that I at last found a massive mushroom. My parents were green with envy, and I swelled with pride, the great explorer. In that moment I understood something, but did not fully integrate it into my awareness. Later, there were many occasions when the world showed me that if I turned off the beaten path and went my own way, I would discover the treasure. But again and again I would be drawn back into the general flow, giving in to the herd instinct. This is the difference between conscious knowledge and integrated awareness. You might suspect something to be true, but that will not help. A huge abyss stands between suspecting something to be true and having articulate knowledge. The first, unlike the second, cannot serve as a guide for action, and so has no practical value. In this regard, transurfing crosses all the T's and transforms a hunch into an articulate expression of knowledge describing what to do and how to do it. Specifically, at some point you have to stop studying the old and start creating the new, or rather, not even create, but take from where all discoveries and masterpieces are found, from eternity. In order to gain access to information stored in the alternative space, you have to lay a foundation of elementary knowledge concerning the area that interests you. Without a certain initial foundation, you will not be able to attune to the corresponding sector of the alternative space. In other words, tune into the database. As soon as you have assimilated the initial stages, you can forget what you have been taught. At that point, you will be ready to make your own discoveries and create a new masterpiece. Any book, picture, or melody is pulled out of the alternative space. You just have to hook into the sector. The hook for a melody might be 2 or 3 essential chords. For a picture, it may be a mood. For a book, a situation. You do not necessarily have to think of a plot in order to write a book. It will come to you later. The entire plot will emerge from the situation if you can pacify the presumptuous mind and allow the characters to extricate themselves from the scene. There is no need to make things up. It's all already there. You just have to calmly follow the alternatives flow. All genius is surprisingly simple. The alternatives flow follows the same unexpected path which people generally would not be capable of guessing at. Even computer programs and technical equipment can be designed in this way without a particular plan working from a certain starting point. Of course, in some instances, a project plan is essential, but where this is not the case, at least in separate areas, you should go with the alternatives flow and allow the concept to grow independently. In this attempt to plan everything beforehand, the mind complicates things with an elaborate construct. The alternatives flow will always come up with the most elegant and optimal solution, which will leave you amazed. How could things have worked out so well without a meticulously designed blueprint? Overall, it is better not to try and dream things up, but simply to carry out the task methodically moving from the beginning to the end. In any project, the idea serves as the starting point. This is the most important thing. The alternatives flow will complete everything else. You do not have to come up with an idea either. So where does the idea come from? It all comes from the same place. All brilliant conjectures exist in eternity and come to the mind via the root of the soul. The mind's task is not to come up with an idea, but to recognize it when it hits you. And it definitely will if you step away from the crowd and walk your own path, obeying the dictates of the heart. The heart has direct access to the alternative space, whereas the mind detects subtle notions and insights and works on interpreting them. Reason does not know. The heart knows. All you have to do is listen to it. You can totally rely on this seemingly superficial statement. The problem here, once again, is that people have a vague understanding of this rather than a clear awareness of the principle. Everyone seems to agree that the heart basically knows everything, but nobody takes it seriously. People pass it by assuming it to be a metaphor and attribute it no meaning. Common sense reasons. Of course there is insight, the inner voice, and intuition, but these are all shaky, intangible, and unreliable. Now iron logic is a different matter entirely based on indisputable facts. So if you have basic information of a given field, the heart can attune to the corresponding area of the alternative space and source new knowledge from there that cannot be read in any book. Ask yourself a question, express it clearly, and then forget about it for a while. Within a few days, the answer will come to you. If it does not, ask the question again from time to time. The answer may come to you over the next few months, but it will definitely come to you. It is all just a matter of whether you have enough resolve to break the established stereotypes. Free yourself from the hold of conventional norms and break the pendulum rule. It requires having the audacity to exercise your own right to knowledge so that you stop seeking answers in books written by others. You just have to change the focus of intention from being given to creating. How are you different from the authors of the books you are reading? Only in that they changed their intention focus, stopped searching, and started creating. They escaped being tied to the opinions of acknowledged authorities and had the courage to set out on their own path. You too can claim your right to be the one who knows. That brings us to what I meant by the third gift that awaits you in the alternative space. Try and imagine how a person feels when they are in the role of the superstar. Their fans see only what lies on the surface, their shining talent, the gloss of fame and wealth. It all creates the impression that this person is no mere mortal, but endowed with exceptional qualities. Is it even possible for the average person to rise to the very peaks of success and hold themselves with sufficient confidence that no one would ever dare doubt their exclusivity? However, for the chosen one, all their attributes of fame seem quite ordinary, even mundane. These individuals hardly see themselves as inhabitants of Mount Olympus because at the end of the day, they know that they are one of many others like them. So what is the difference? What separates a country girl from a star of show business, a shaky student from a luminary in the world of science, and the average person from the chosen one? It is just a matter of a single step. One type claims their right and the other type cannot bring themselves to, or does not believe they are capable or worthy of it. In the minds of the timid, there sits a firmly rooted notion that in this world, the chosen ones exist because they have been chosen by all the others by virtue of their exceptional qualities. In reality, this idea is a false stereotype. The chosen ones chose themselves. Only later, because of this, did anyone else pay them any attention. Assert your right to be a chosen one. From this moment onwards, I have chosen myself. You do not have this right because you are worthy or capable. You have this right because it is your birthright. The alternative space contains everything, including the most important thing intended for you personally, the verdict that you have this right. This is your ticket to eternity and sanction for your privilege to be the maker of your own reality. Your entire life you have been taught how you are expected to be, how you should behave, what you should revere and strive for. Now claim your lawful right to establish your own canons. It is for you to decide what is right for you and what is not, because only you can shape the layer of your world. You are quite justified in considering something to be correct that others consider false if it does not harm anyone else. When you use your privilege in life to deliver your own verdict, you can remain true to your own credo. There are as many opinions in life as there are people. Some insist that something is black, and others will claim it's white. Who should you believe? As you may recall, the world is a mirror that agrees with anyone who dares deliver their own verdict. You, however, are no mirror. You are either the one who accepts the other people's verdicts, or you are the maker who delivers their own. When you realize this is the question of which truth you should consider the only truth and whose side you should be on, the blacks or the whites, it ceases to be relevant. Now you can determine your own truth. I have decided this to be true because I am the maker of my own reality. And it will work because you have the alternative space and the dual mirror at your disposal, everything you need to stream your plans into physical reality. It is really that simple. The only condition is that you absolutely must have the temerity to assert your own right. If you experience doubt or pangs of conscience, your verdict loses its power and you go from being the lawmaker to the accused. When you doubt, you do the wrong thing regardless. It is not a matter of how appropriate your thinking and actions are, but the extent to which you are confident you are right. This needs to be integrated fully into your awareness so that the heart and mind merge into one. You already have the explanation. All that remains is to turn familiarity into true knowledge. How? Through experience. Act and become convinced of it. You must not let the will of the maker become the dictate of the mind. The verdict only has any power if the heart and mind are one. Anyone who fails to listen to the voice of the heart is not making. They're making mistakes. Everywhere you go, you see people doing things badly. For example, there are people who have no voice, no ear for music, and yet love to sing. Sometimes you come across blatant ineptitude, and yet the individual is convinced that they are a star, even though success eludes them. Why does their verdict not work? Because in their heart they know that they are no good at what they are doing. The mind cannot accept the truth, and so it tries as hard as it can to prove the opposite. There are no totally incompetent people as such. These are just people who have not found their true talent and are walking someone else's path. The third gift offers many advantages. The right to declare your own verdict represents freedom from oppressive circumstances and everything that places a shadow over your life or creates obstacles on your path. It will help you acquire a quiet confidence. My world takes care of me, and I am strong enough to allow myself the weakness of accepting the attention. From the moment you claim the right to declare your own verdict on what is good and bad, or right and wrong for your world, you can eliminate any judgment imposed on you from the outside, including anything connected with transurfing itself, as long as you do not give in to guilt, indecision, or pangs of conscience, and as long as your verdict does not cause anyone any harm. That brings me to my final point. The alternative space contains everything, and everything that you wish for with heart and mind is yours. You should be aware, however, that a gatekeeper stands at the threshold to eternity, an absolute law that guards access to everything to be found there. This implacable guard only permits access to those who have the boldness to assert their right as maker. Your verdict is your entrance pass. I am capable and worthy because I have decided it is so. I do not want or hope. I intend. Claim your right, and the gatekeeper will open the gates of eternity before you. Summary. Accumulation of toxins in the body, excess potential, and unrealized intention reduces your energy levels. In order to free up energy reserves, you have to either let go of some of your potential intentions or stream them into reality. In order for the energy to work, you have to concentrate on the end goal. Concentration is not tension, it is focus. Teach yourself to think about what you are actually doing in the moment. Systematically focusing your attention on the target slide is essential. Stop justifying yourself. Stop trying to prove how important you are. Maintain the amalgam and follow the mirror principles. To reduce the effect of polarization, you have to release the over-tightened spokes. Techniques for shaping your own reality include the target slide, visualizing the process, energy channels, the frame, the explosion wave, outer sphere, scenery reduction, target amalgam, focusing intention, and integration. The preferred approach for you personally should be the one you find works the best. Do everything in the way that feels most comfortable. Regular practice is the most important condition for success. You have to escape from the mirror. Once you have a foundation of knowledge, you can change the focus of your intention from receive to create. You do not have to come up with ideas. Just recognize them when they hit you. Departing from your starting point, go with the alternatives flow. Claim your right to be right. Leave the crowd and deliver your verdict. Assert the right of the maker. I have taken this decision because I am the maker of my own reality. Afterward, a strange reality. To conclude, I would like to go a little further in strengthening the ground under the mind's feet. There is so much in transurfing that seems incredible, but alas, one has to keep explaining to the mind that it is all indeed real. Whatever model that had been chosen to serve as a foundation for transurfing, its principles would still be valid. In other words, all the principles included here are invariant in relationship to the model. The key principle expresses the idea that the energy of our thoughts not only has an indirect influence on our physical reality, but a direct impact as well. The formal line of science still refuses to acknowledge this phenomenon because so far, experimental testing has yielded ambiguous results. Regardless, you and I need to solve our problems now and cannot wait for the scientists to give their word of approval. We are all aware that the world is subject to the laws of causality in which every effect has its cause. Cause is usually understood to mean some kind of action. The problem is that thoughts are usually perceived as an instruction to a subsequent action and not as the transmission of a physical energy capable of influencing the world around us. Nonetheless, the facts are stubborn and will eventually have their way. The unexplained phenomenon of outer intention has not been totally ignored by science. Carl Jung, the great Swiss psychiatrist, carried out research into the phenomena linked to the interaction between thought and material reality. Jung analyzed hundreds of curious instances which appeared to be unaccountable coincidences with no visible cause. Jung defined this kind of coincidence synchronicity. In his lecture on synchronicity, he provides a classical example from his personal practice. Quote, On April 1, 1949, I made a note in the morning of an inscription containing a figure that was half man and half fish. There was fish for lunch. In conversation, someone mentioned the custom of making an April fish of someone. In the afternoon, a former patient of mine whom I had not seen for several months showed me some impressive pictures of a fish. In the evening, I was shown a piece of embroidery with sea monsters and fish in it. The following morning, I saw a former patient who was visiting me for the first time in 10 years. She had dreamed of a large fish the night before. A few months later, when I was using this series in a larger work and had just finished writing it down, I walked to a spot by the lake in front of the house where I had already been several times that morning. This time, a fish about a foot long lay on the seawall. I had no idea how it could have gotten there. I cannot resist citing another extract from Jung's lecture about a principle you will learn more about later. Jung writes, "I could tell you a great many such stories which are in principle no more surprising or incredible than the irrefutable results arrived at by Rhine," with reference to the experiments involving extrasensory perception, for example, card guessing, "and you would see that almost every case calls for its own explanation. But the causal explanation, the only possible one from the standpoint of natural science, breaks down to the psychic relativation of space and time, which together form the indispensable premises for cause and effect relationships." My example concerns a young woman patient who, in spite of efforts made on both sides, proved to be psychologically inaccessible. The difficulty lay in the fact that she always knew better about everything. Her excellent education had provided her with a weapon ideally suited to this purpose, namely a highly polished Cartesian rationalism with an impeccably geometrical idea of reality. After several fruitless attempts to sweeten her rationalism with a somewhat more human understanding, I had to confine myself to the hope that something unexpected and irrational would turn up, something that would burst the intellectual retort into which she had sealed herself. Well, I was sitting opposite her one day with my back to the window, listening to her flow of rhetoric. She had an impressive dream the night before in which someone had given her a golden scarab, a costly piece of jewelry. While she was still telling me this dream, I heard something behind me gently tapping on the window. I turned around and saw that it was a fairly large flying insect that was knocking against the window pane from outside in an obvious effort to get into the dark room. This seemed to me very strange. I opened the window immediately and caught the creature in the air as it flew in. It was a scarabized beetle, or Monroe Schaffer, Cetonia aurata, whose gold-green color most nearly represents that of a golden scarab. I handed the beetle to my patient with the words, "Here is your golden scarab." This experience punctured the desired hole in her rationalism and broke the ice of her intellectual resistance. The treatment could now be continued with satisfactory results. About a half hour after I had been considering whether to include Jung's beetle in the text as an example, a wanderer of quite impressive appearance flew in through the window. It was a beetle similar to the one described above. You may or may not believe me, but I have to confess that I was not at all surprised by the rare visit. It is not that I am so used to the phenomena of synchronicity that they no longer catch my attention. On the contrary, absorbed in my own thoughts, I did not attribute any meaning to it at all. I automatically let the beetle out of the window so that it would not have to look for its way out. It was not until a little time had passed that it suddenly struck me. I'm such an idiot. Every time outer intention announces its presence, I'm still wide-eyed with amazement. They were tugging at me with all their might, trying to show me a sign while I was in a deep, deep waking sleep. If I was at all superstitious, I would have taken it to be a sign from above. You can imagine how other people are also living life asleep and fail to notice the manifestations of outer intention. There are many more examples like this. From the point of view of transurfing, the situation is quite clear. In isolated cases, visualization generates a strong gust of the wind of outer intention. However, Jung did not rush to make any final conclusions concerning the reasons for such coincidences, whether the thoughts caused the event or thoughts arose as a result of a subconscious premonition of the event. On the one hand, Jung states that thoughts create the foundation for a series of chance events, and on the other hand, I sometimes cannot get away from the idea that there is a certain premonition of the onset of a series of specific events. In his work, Synchronicity, an acausal connecting principle, 1960, Jung defined synchronicity as the simultaneous occurrence of a certain psychic state with one or more external events which appear as meaningful parallels to the momentary subjective state. Jung hesitated for a long time about whether to publish his work because the phenomenon of synchronicity was inconceivable to traditional scientific thinking. Jung makes a vague and yet, according to the standards of traditional science, relatively bold conclusion. Synchronistic phenomena prove the simultaneous occurrence of meaningful equivalences in heterogeneous, causally unrelated processes. In other words, they prove that a content perceived by an observer can, at the same time, be represented by an outside event without any causal connection. From this, it follows either that the psyche cannot be localized in space or that space is relative to the psyche. There's no contradiction of the law of causality in the phenomena Jung is describing. There is always a cause. It is just that the interaction dynamics between thought and environment remain elusive to our current understanding. Which is the cause in synchronistic coincidences? Are events shaped by thoughts, or do thoughts arise as the premonition of an event? From the point of view of transurfing, both explanations are acceptable. The heart has access to data held in the information field, which can then be interpreted by the mind. The mind, in turn, shapes thoughts, which, under the condition of unity of heart and mind, can be manifest as physical reality. These tenets lie at the very core of the transurfing model. However, I should emphasize once again that the alternatives model does not claim to serve as a detailed description of the world. Instead, it represents a benchmark, an aid for the comprehension of certain principles. We still know very little about the world we live in, but this need not prevent us from applying the transurfing principles. The fact that the principles work is for you to discover. All phenomena related to the impact thought energy has on the surrounding world can be substantiated by the well-known theorem put forth by the quantum physicist John Bell. The theorem sounds: there are no isolated systems. Every particle in the universe is in instantaneous, or exceeding the speed of light, connection with every other particle. The entire system, even if its parts are separated by huge distances, works as a unified system. This theorem has been theoretically proven and is already substantiated on a practical level. Despite the fact that instantaneous connection contradicts the special theory of relativity, which claims that energy cannot move faster than light, the theorem has its place. It would seem that outer intention fails to conform to the theory of relativity. In general, quantum physics is based on unproven postulates, which means that it too represents a specific kind of model. And there is not just one inexplicable contradiction in the world of quantum physics, but many, which once again confirms that undue significance should not be attached to any one particular model. It should be noted that Jung's ideas have found support among the very founders of modern physics, such as Wolfgang Pauli and Albert Einstein. In addition, it is quite probable that the process of information exchange does not have anything to do with energy at all, which is why it can take place faster than the speed of light. The alternatives model is not without its own contradictions, but nonetheless, it succeeds in explaining many aspects of reality. The alternatives model may not totally resolve certain known paradoxes of time and space, but it does at least iron out a few of the creases. Until now, we have been looking at the transitions from one lifeline to another in synchronicity with time. Lifelines have always existed in parallel to the temporal axis. In other words, the transition is always made from one point in time to the exact same point. Imagine if two lifelines existed that were not parallel to the time axis. A projection of the same point from the two lines onto the time axis would show the points in different places. The transition between them would indicate a shift in time into the past or the future, depending on the direction of the obliquity. The relative steepness of the declination would define the extent of time different between the 2 points. By analogy, if two lifelines were not parallel relative to the space axis, the transition through space from one point to the other would happen instantly, or at least at an unbelievable speed. The steepness and direction of the gradient would determine the distance and direction involved in the shift. This is obviously a very rough explanation, but sufficiently acceptable to the relevant content. The painstaking reader will no doubt object, but what about the paradox, the contradiction of cause and effect in relationships and time travel? I suppose I went back in time before my birth and brutally murdered my parents. How then did I come into the world? Within the framework of the alternatives model, this is only a seeming paradox. I cannot be born into that same lifeline, but so what? I can be born into a different lifeline. You may recall that there are an infinite number of lifelines, alternatives where I both exist and where I do not exist. The most bloodthirsty paradox lover could even return to their childhood, meet with themselves, and do away with the innocent creature. In this scenario, the reader would not be meeting their actual self, but with a separate realized alternative, which exists along with endless others. The past cannot be changed because it has already happened. It happened not only because a past section of a lifeline was realized, but because the alternatives of those past events already existed. In this sense, you could say the same thing about the future, that it has already happened, and so cause and effect relationships are not contradicted in the phenomenon of the shift from one lifeline to another. You could cross out one of the frames in a film roll, but it would not damage any of the other frames. Time is static. It is only the realization of potential lifeline alternatives that has the quality of dynamic range. The force for realization moves across lifeline alternatives in the same way as the circle of light from a torch moves across forest trees in the dark. It is, however, possible to travel into the past or the future on one and the same lifeline, and here we do come across a paradox. Is this not why the predictions made by clairvoyants are only approximate and often quite simply inaccurate? Clairvoyants are somehow capable of scanning fragments of the future. If these scanned fragments are part of other lifelines, then it is easy to explain the element of error in their predictions. The alternatives model has it that the greater distance between one lifeline and another, the greater the difference in the scenery. Scientists are also baffled by the movement dynamics of UFOs. They accelerate instantly, then stop, or make sudden changes in direction at right angles. Even given the quality of inertness, this type of movement pattern is impossible, to say nothing of the huge stress that it would cause to the inhabitants of the devices. From the point of view of transurfing, there is nothing supernatural about these phenomena. Aliens do not experience physical stress because UFOs do not fly like an airplane or space shuttle. It is probable that what we are observing is not so much the movement of the object as its realization at different points in the alternative space. Much remains unclear to us in questions relating to the heart and mind. Materialistic science presents the world as if it were a mechanical system. In other words, matter is primary and determines consciousness. However, in the light of recent achievements made by the same area of science, this model is increasingly losing its position of authority. The substitution and review of scientific models will be an ongoing process, all the while that man erroneously believes himself to be capable of penetrating to the very essence of the laws of nature. A simple hen could equally well express its preferred concept of the creation, construction, and development of a poultry farm. Man stands a rung higher than a hen in his intellectual evolution, but that does not bring the infinite complexity of the world any closer. Man is not meant to know and understand everything. The pendulums of science and religion that claim to represent the last instance of truth have won their dominance not so much on account of a correct interpretation of the truth as on account of the fact that they have successfully persecuted their dissidents. The constant conflict exists not only between the pendulums of science and religion, but also between individual branches within the same pendulums. The battle is ongoing, and it is a battle not for the truth, but for adherence. When I was substantiating the mind's inability to store all information, I based my argument on the model of imagining information in the form of computer bytes. However, this particular model could turn out to be incompatible with the neural activity of the brain. Who knows how information is really stored? Imagine, how would a scientist have researched a television or radio if they were born in an age prior to the invention of these devices? They would have tried pushing buttons, removing various parts, and watching for changes on the screen. Not having any idea how a TV works and basing their findings on the results of scientific observation, the scientists would have to come to various conclusions, at the root of which would stand one seemingly undeniable fact. A television generates all these different programs by itself. They are born right there in the transistors and microcircuitries. This is roughly how adherents of the mechanistic model explore the human brain. It is true that damage to individual areas of the brain can have a predictable impact on a person's perception and cognitive ability. The functional principle of the human intellect, however, remains a mystery, and yet these adherents conclude that matter and nothing else determines consciousness. Conservative followers of the mechanistic model proudly refer to themselves as scientists and declare haughtily that their science is the true science, based on factual information and not the speculations of amateurs. Anything that fails to fit the theory is declared anti-scientific and is not only rejected, but made the object of persecution. Fortunately, the number of scientists of this nature is dwindling. You may agree or disagree with the information shared in this text. Either way, remember it is just a model. No one can say exactly how things really happen. The mind tends to negate anything that does not fit into its context of sensible explanations. Until the mind is convinced of the rational nature of knowledge, it will never allow it to be integrated into the worldview template. Transurfing works. Of that there is no doubt, but to apply it to the mind must have its explanation. The alternatives model gives us the benefit of some solid ground beneath our feet, but no more than that. It remains nothing more than a diagram that could be transformed into a more sophisticated model. For example, you could get rid of the assumption that so-called lifelines exist, which would make the early part of the book easier to understand. This would transform the alternative space from discrete to continuous. There would no longer be any paths through the forest. Only the forest would remain. Yet this would not change the essence of transurfing. No matter what the model is, it can only ever provide an approximate, more or less adequate reflection of reality. The path of studying reality is as eternal as the diversity of natural phenomena is infinite. You may have noticed that the transurfing principles overlap with the principles of similar teachings. There is nothing strange about that. Any teaching is relatively insular, and it represents an autonomous model. However, given that we are all people with roughly the same quality to our worldviews, different models will have certain aspects in common. To ask which of these many models provides a more adequate description of the world is pointless. The only thing of any significance is the practical results one can achieve from any given model. You could take mathematics, for instance. Different branches of mathematics represent separate models which describe material realization. A physics problem can be solved in different ways depending on the mathematical apparatus applied. There's no point in arguing whether analytical geometry or differential calculus is better in either case. You can only choose which particular approach you prefer. You too must make your choice. The intention of the ancient magicians. In conclusion, I would like to align myself with the intention of the ancient magicians. By this I mean the knowledge keepers who lived in our reality until the breakup of civilization that existed before this one. Fragments of this knowledge have been preserved to this day in the form of isolated esoteric teachings and practices. There is no information to suggest, although not yet proven, that certain ancient magicians shifted into a different reality and at this time are trying to pass their knowledge to humanity by transcendental means. Until recently, I would have treated claims like these with more than a healthy level of skepticism. Yet over the past few decades, there have been an increasing number of cases where people in different parts of the world have independently put forward similar interpretations of the same knowledge. Now, I too have come into an intimate contact with this same type of knowledge, which, as I said, I could have never made up myself. I cannot say with confidence whether the guardian, the meeting with whom I described in the first chapter, exists, at least in our reality. Having said that, I do have plenty of reason to suppose that he does in fact exist. I have come across many different characters in dreams, but they had absolutely no effect on my highly conservative worldview. My meeting with the guardian not only turned my worldview upside down, it turned my life around. Suddenly, for no particular reason, a former physicist showing no previous signs of aptitude started to write books. It would be too incredible and extravagant to accept that the motivation for all this was a run-of-the-mill dream. The guardian never appeared to me again after that first meeting, although sometimes it seems to me that I can feel his presence. Either way, I have never considered transurfing my own knowledge. I am just a repeater tuned into the corresponding area of the alternatives space. I do not consider the work to be my own merit, although I must confess I found it extremely difficult to express and systematize the knowledge of transurfing. It is one thing to learn something, but quite another to be able to talk about it. You too will not only learn about this knowledge, you will assimilate it. For having devoured the book in one go, you will not have received knowledge, so much as an awareness and an adeptness. These are different things. Transurfing offers quite concrete methods for turning your dreams into reality. This might not be enough for some people. If you are looking for tricks that can be spelt out like the procedure for tying a tie, you could spend your life searching in vain. Creating your own fate cannot be reduced to a simple rule that goes, step 1, 2, 3. Transurfing cannot be reduced to a technique of executing certain moves. It is not about technique, but about becoming aware of your inner freedom and the feeling that you are master of the layer of your world. Once you experience that feeling, everything will unfold of its own accord without the need for any particular technique. In order to achieve this level of awareness, you have to make transurfing a way of life. There is no other way. It is not at all laborious or burdensome. It's actually quite entertaining, like playing with a mirror. The world is a mirror of your relationship to it, only with a delayed reaction. By comparing your relationship to the world with the subsequent reaction of the mirror, you teach your mind a simple truth, and yet one that is difficult for one's consciousness to truly assimilate. You shape the layer of your world with intention. It is also essential to become comfortable with the simple but strange truth that you do not need to be concerned with the means and ways of achieving the goal. One fundamental principle lies at the foundation of this statement. The focus of intention determines the vector of the alternatives flow. All you have to do is maintain the focus and let the alternatives flow take its course. The means of achieving the goal will present itself. You cannot and need not know exactly how the goal will be realized. Whatever happens, if you keep your target slide in mind and observe the principle of coordination, the alternatives flow will carry you to your goal. Such is the law.